Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel, That Model Railway Guy, and welcome to a video that might seem just a little bit familiar. So, quite a while ago now, I made a video where I demonstrated using a PECO Loco Lift almost as a storage cassette for very small trains on a micro layout, and that video went down really well with a lot of you. Recently, some of you have been asking where you can get those Loco Lifts, and unfortunately they have now been discontinued. That's though because PECO have recently just released their brand new updated Loco Lift, and I've managed to get my hands on one. So I thought today what we do is we take a look at it and compare it to the old one and have a look at some of the pros and the cons of each. Of course, the PECO Loco Lift does come as a kit, so that means the first thing we have to do is put it together. So let's start there, shall we? So this is the box the Loco Lift comes in, and you can see I've gone for the double version. That's because this new Loco Lift is actually modular, so you can connect multiple ones together to hold longer locos and potentially even multiple units. Inside are all the parts we'll need to make up a section of the lift, and it does go together fairly easily, although you will need a screwdriver and a pair of small pliers. We'll start off by attaching one of these brass strips to the side of the lift. These have a few small tabs that you need to line up and push into the slots on the plastic sides. Underneath you'll also see that there are more tabs that hold it in place here too. And once you've got the brass strip into position, you should see the tabs poking out through the other side. We can now use the pliers to twist these tabs 90 degrees either way, and that will lock them into position. That doesn't actually say to do this in the instructions, but that's what PECO did in their demonstration video, and it does seem to make sense. And of course, once we've done this for one side, we need to do it again for the second side. And now that we basically have both sides made up, we can clip on the end parts. The ends actually have two sections to them, as this new Loco Lift is adjustable, meaning that it can be used for N gauge and various other gauges all the way up to the very niche EM gauge. As you can see here, the first side of the end piece just clips into place. You then want to make sure that the opposite end piece goes on the other end of the lift. And then you'll need to repeat this process using the other set of end pieces for the other side piece. Again, make sure you get the corresponding side pieces the right way round so that it matches the side you've already done. And with that done, we can now fit the two sides together, and as you can see, the end pieces just kind of slot together. Like I said, these are adjustable, so you can use them for a wide variety of gauges. There are little markings on the moulding that show where you need to set the width for each gauge, along with notches as well, which makes it easier to line up. Now, in order to lock the gauge into place, we need to secure it with some screws that are included. You can see at the top here there are two little holes for the screws to go in, so it really is just a case of putting the screw in place and tightening it up. And again, we need to do this for the back end too, and don't forget to make sure you set it at the same gauge. Finally, the Loco Lift does come with some shutters that slot into place. Of course, you may need to cut these down if you're using a smaller gauge, but again, PECO have provided handy little notches that you can cut along, which should make this job much easier. If you're using 00 gauge though, you won't need to cut these down, and the shutters just easily slot into place. So that is one section of the Loco Lift complete. Obviously it's much shorter than the previous version, but this should be really good for small tank engines and industrial locos. So let's test that out now. So here we are in the fiddle yard on the modular model railway, and with the lift now down on the track, it's time to try running in a loco, and here comes the Hornby B2 Peckett. As you can see, there is a little bit of a slight jump as it runs up onto the brass strips, but it has now run all the way into the lift. And then I can drop the shutter in behind the loco, which just secures it and stops it from accidentally sliding out of one end. And then of course it's really easy to remove the lift and the loco from the track. In this instance I'm just going to turn it round, but obviously you could move it to another track or into a storage box at this point. And of course with the shutter removed, the Peckett is free to run out again and off it goes. So that's the basic premise, and at this point it does seem like the lift performs just as well as the old version did. The small size is great for being able to easily move and handle smaller tank engines, but I do wish they'd made it just a little bit longer. For example, here you can see from this top-down view a Hornby J94 running into a single section of the Loco Lift. It does just about fit, but when you then try to put both of the shutters in, the back one gets caught on the Loco's bunker. This is a real shame because the J94 isn't exactly a long tank engine, and it sort of brings into question why PECO chose a length that wouldn't fit a fairly standard tank engine in 00 gauge. Similarly, here we can see the Bachmann 1F is a slightly shorter tank engine, but again, if I try to put the shutters down, the second one gets caught, this time on the couplings. If it was about a centimetre longer, then this wouldn't have been a problem, which just shows how close it is, so yeah, that's a bit of a miss there from PECO. And of course, this is just 00 gauge I'm testing too. I imagine the single lift will be used a lot for N gauge locos, but I don't actually know if it'll fit something as long as a Pacific, for example, in there. By the way, for anyone interested, I have measured the lift both with and without the shutters, and I put the necessary lengths down in the description box below. Going back to the Pecco though, I'm just going to run it in there again and put the shutter down behind it. As I lift it off and move it away, you can see I have another one of these lifts ready and made up sitting over in the entrance to the fiddle yard. One great thing with these new Loco lifts is that they do stack really easily, so I can put it on top of the other one and it does slot into place. Of course, all this is great for small tank engines, but as I have two of these Loco lifts, it would be silly not to show you how they join together to form a longer lift for use with tender locos. So let's do that now. So joining these two sections together to make one longer lift is actually a really simple process. With the sections pushed together end to end, there are two small recesses down the side. Included with the kit are some clips that just push into these recessed areas, and once they click into place, they hold the whole thing together. And once you've done the top and the bottom on one side, don't forget to flip it round and do the same on the other side. Now PECO say you can join up to 4 of these together, which should be long enough to handle even the longest of locos, and maybe even a 2-car DMU. That said, I'm not sure I would trust making it any longer than this, as it does seem to flex a lot more the longer it gets. You can see here that because there's nothing supporting the gap between the brass strips, it is able to push inwards without too much force. It's not that the Loco Lift feels flimsy, but it just doesn't feel as robust as the previous version, for example, and I'm just not sure how confident I feel in using it yet. Anyway, let's give it a go. So here it is down on the track again in its longer double length formation. This time I've got the Hornby J15 running into it, and again you can see that there's no issue with it entering the lift. It also doesn't stutter or cut out the further along the lift it gets either, as the brass strips seem to have a good contact all the way along. And again, putting the shutter in place behind the Loco, I can now lift it up and turn it around. And like I said earlier, it doesn't feel like it's going to fall apart, but I am just very aware of that open space below the Loco, and I wouldn't want to have it in the air for too long. With it back down on the track, I can remove the shutter and the J15 is free to run back out onto the layout facing the opposite way. Regarding the length, it will fit most tender engines except for Pacifics in my experience. Here you can see I've got a model of the Flying Scotsman, and like those tank engines we looked at earlier, it does fit on the lift, but there isn't enough space to hold it in place with the shutters. Again, this does seem just a little bit bizarre, and I'm left scratching my head a bit. In fact, if we compare this to the old Loco Lift, then you can see that the new one is shorter. Not by much at all, which shows again just how close it is, but I can't understand why they didn't just make it the same length. Also, I should note that so far I've been demonstrating this new Loco Lift in the fiddle yard where there's no ballast around the track, but I do think it's worth checking it out on a more scenic section. You can see here that when I bring the Loco Lift down to the track, it doesn't slot over the rails quite as easily as it did before. Now, I wouldn't say that this is a major issue, but it does look like the plastic around the bottom does slightly prevent it from sitting completely flat, depending on how messy or uneven your ballast is. And in comparison, we can see the older version here has no issue with the ballast at all, it just slots over the rails because it seems to have a much flatter profile. Overall, I do think there is a place for both of these Loco lifts from PECO, as they both have advantages and disadvantages. So to finish up, let's take a look at some of the pros and cons for both versions. Starting with the old Loco lift first, well, for the pros we have to lead with the design, which is really simple but works well. Following on from that, the solid base is a real plus too, as it makes the Locos feel much more secure. It also has foam sides as well, which, while they may not stop a Loco from falling out, they will protect the finish from getting scratched. Finally, it's long enough to fit every Loco I've tried in it. Obviously, tank engines are no problem, but the longer Pacific Locos fit without hanging over the edge too. The cons are, well, firstly, it's been discontinued, so you can't actually get these anymore unless you happen to find one secondhand online somewhere. Obviously, with that fixed base plate as well, it does only work for 00 gauge locomotives. As far as I know, they never made an N gauge one. And finally, it is a fixed length. While I'm sure you could extend it, it's not easy to do or a built-in feature like the newer version. So onto the new Loco lift then. The biggest pro for this obviously has to be that it works for multiple gauges, and with the removal of just a few screws, you can easily change it to match the gauge you need. Secondly, it's modular, so you can have shorter lengths for the shorter Locos, and then can gradually add more for longer Locos. It also comes with shutters included for the ends as well, which the old one never did. These also slot into place and protect Locos from falling out of one end while you're moving it. And finally, the sections are more easily stackable. While I think you could technically stack the old versions on top of each other, it seems to be more of a built-in feature this time, with the lifts actually locking together. Onto the cons though, it is a bit too flexible for my liking. I do think that is because of the adjustable nature of the lift, meaning that there's no solid base, and the flexibility seems to increase the more sections you join together. Also, another big problem is that the individual sections aren't long enough to hold many standard tank engines with the shutters in place, and likewise the doubled sections aren't able to hold larger tender engines in place either, which just seems like a really silly oversight. Finally, there may be some issues with using it on ballasted track too, which weren't evident with the older version. Like I showed earlier, it all works fine if you're using it in a non-scenic area, which I suspect most people probably will, but if you want to use it on ballasted track, it's not impossible, but it might be a bit more tricky. So there we go, that's my look at the new PECO Loco lift. Generally, I think this was a good idea, and it's not a bad product, but they have made a few errors which mean I won't be throwing away my old version anytime soon. Anyway, that's going to be it for this time. It was nice to do something a bit different today, so I hope you enjoyed this video, and do let me know what you think as well down in the comments. If you haven't already, please do subscribe and hit the bell icon, as it really does help the channel out, and in the meantime, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!